and welcome to today's lecture on Antigone. I'm your professor, Dr. Rob Steffen, and today we are going to talk about one of the unluckiest ladies in all of ancient Greece. Now, Antigone was born into a bad situation. Her mom is her mom, but also her grandmother? Oh, gross. Not only that, but both of her brothers die. They actually kill each other. So what do you do when the laws of society prevent you from doing what's morally right? Find out as we investigate Antigone, breaker of laws.
While it may seem as though there are countless Greek plays that have been passed down through the ages, there are in fact only 3 ancient Greek tragedy playwrights whose works we still have. Of those 3, Sophocles' work reigns supreme. Sophocles grew up in Athens during the 5th century BCE, the golden age of Athens, and during his lifetime he authored more than 120 plays. To understand just how impressive his plays were, it's necessary to know a little bit about ancient Greek theater.
And these plays aren't just for fun. They're actually part of a big religious festival to Dionysus. So each year, 3 playwrights are chosen, and each of those playwrights submits 3 different plays. Now our guy Sophocles here, he enters 30 of these during the course of his lifetime. And he wins amazingly 24 of them. That's an 80% win rate. And not only that, he never comes in lower than 2nd place. Pretty impressive, Sophocles.
Sophocles' most famous plays revolve around the city of Thebes in the Greek region of Boeotia. Now we call these 3 plays, Oedipus Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone, the Theban plays. Although they weren't originally part of the same trilogy, they all focus on the royal family of Thebes and the downfall of that family, largely at the unknowing hands of the tragic hero Oedipus.
Now, with many of Sophocles' plays, we see him try to grapple with the imperfections of mankind and the idea that we live in a very large and oftentimes very harsh world. And so, no matter how often or how hard his characters try to do the right thing, it often ends up being wrong.
Sophocles' most famous play is Oedipus Rex, or Oedipus the King. The title character Oedipus was born to King Laius and Queen Jocasta of the city of Thebes. But unfortunately for Oedipus, and for Laius and Jocasta, the king received a prophecy that his son would kill him. He can't kill his own baby for fear of wrath of the gods, so he gives the baby to a shepherd to expose him on a mountainside. But Oedipus is just so darn cute that the shepherd can't do it, and instead gives the baby to the king and queen of Corinth, where he's then raised in the royal court.
Now, when he's growing up, Oedipus hears of this horrible prophecy from the Oracle of Delphi that he's going to kill his dad and marry his mom. Ugh. And, Oedipus is a good dude. He doesn't want anything to do with that. And so thinking that the king and queen of Corinth are actually his parents, he simply leaves, right? He figures that's going to be the best way to avoid that fate. And he journeys northward, unknowingly on his way to Thebes. And along that journey, he meets an old man, gets into an argument with him, and eventually kills the old guy.
When Oedipus gets to Thebes, he learns that the king's recently been killed. He doesn't think much of it, because the city is currently being tortured by the Sphinx, a monster with the body of a lion, and the wings of an eagle, and the head of a woman. To defeat the Sphinx, Oedipus must answer a riddle. Which creature has one voice, and yet becomes 4-footed, and 2-footed, and 3-footed?
And so Oedipus answers, man! Man crawls on all 4s as a baby. and he walks on 2 legs as an adult, and he uses a walking stick in old age. And so the terrifying Sphinx of Thebes is defeated, and Oedipus takes his rightful place as the new king and marries the widowed queen Jocasta. But soon a plague strikes Thebes, and Oedipus decides to cure the plague, he's going to go find out who slew the previous king, and perhaps bringing justice to that will cure the plague. And in his investigations, he realizes it was him. When he was walking on his way to Thebes and he killed that old man, that was the king. And upon realizing that, he also realizes that he's now married his mother. And so Queen Jocasta, when she realizes this, she hangs herself. And the new king Oedipus takes pins from her dress and stabs his own eyes out when he realizes this. Not a great fate for the hero who defeated the Sphinx. Whew.
The story of Antigone begins after the death of Laius and Jocasta and the blinding of Oedipus. Antigone, along with her brothers Eteocles and Polynices, are the children of Oedipus and Jocasta. And in the beginning, Eteocles and Polynices share power in Thebes. But like all shared power, this doesn't last, and Thebes soon descends into civil war. The 2 brothers kill each other, fighting for the throne.
Now, the new king declares that Eteocles, he should be honored. But Polynices, well, he should not be honored in any way. He should just be left on the battlefield to rot. And not only that, he actually bans anyone from administering the proper funerary rites for Polynices.
Antigone, the sister of both Eteocles and Polynices, decides that this is unjust, and despite the demands of the king, she holds the proper funerary rites for her brother Polynices. When he finds out, the king is furious. Antigone goes to defend herself, not by saying she didn't do it, but rather by saying she did. But it was a noble act. King Creon declares that Antigone be put to death, buried alive no less, for breaking the law set by the king.
Now, in the end, King Creon changes his mind. He decides he should not kill Antigone, and he's going to release her. But by this time, Antigone has already hanged herself. And now everybody just starts dying. The son of the king and queen, he kills himself because he was in love with Antigone. And then the queen, the mother of that kid, she kills herself because her son has killed himself. And so even though Antigone was trying to do the right thing, everybody starts dying nonetheless.
One of the driving themes of Antigone revolves around the conflict between the duties and obligations to various entities. To the king and state, to the family and home, and to the will of the gods. With Antigone moving to perform the necessary funerary rites for her brother, in spite of the dictate of the king himself, she is very clearly choosing her duty to the gods and to her family over her duty to the king and to the state.
Now, in another sense, this could be seen as a conflict between kind of man-made law on the one hand and natural law on the other hand. And so King Creon, with his declarations, right, he would side with the man-made law. Whereas Antigone, she would go with natural law, right? And this would be done in the sense of her duty to her family, her brother Polynices, and to the gods.
Some scholars have seen Antigone as a play centered around the theme of civil disobedience. How do you react to an unjust law? Sophocles, in this case, would seem to be advocating that unjust laws should be disobeyed, despite the dire consequences that might come with that.
And this is what we mean by Greek drama transcending the ages. This question of how do you respond to unjust laws That's just as relevant in today's society as it was 2,500 years ago, right? We only need to look back, 50 years or so to the civil rights movement to really think deeply about how we should act when laws are unjust. And that theme is going to continue to be relevant as long as governments continue making laws.
While Antigone doesn't have a strong cult presence dedicated exclusively to her in ancient Greece, her actions in Sophocles' plays do indeed suggest some belief in the afterlife. The burying of her brother is not just something that needs to be done for society to view her as proper, but rather, this is necessary to successfully send the soul down to Hades in the afterlife.
Now, remember that the Greek conception of the afterlife is one where the soul goes down and just kind of wanders aimlessly for eternity. And so it's a little bit weird, right, that funerary rites play such a big role in just sending the soul down to wander. But when you think about it from the other perspective, right, that if you don't administer those rites, the soul doesn't get to go down to Hades and can never find any sort of peace, well then it starts to make a little bit of sense.
One of the interesting things in Antigone is that the burial of her brother seems to happen twice. Once at the very beginning, and then again after the body has been uncovered. Scholars are deeply divided on why this needed to occur, since the usual interpretation would suggest that the first burial would have fulfilled the funerary rites and allowed the soul to descend into Hades.
So people have different ideas here, and some people think that the funerary rites weren't completed the first time, that Antigone still needed to pour libations to complete those. Other people end up thinking that this is a result of Antigone's character. It's meant to highlight her stubbornness, perhaps a not so great quality. And still other people think this is kind of a plot convention, meant to build drama and to allow the heroic actions of Antigone to resonate with the audience. So Antigone asks one of the core questions, right? What should you do with an unjust law? And according to Sophocles, he seems to indicate that you should disobey that law even if the consequences are dire. And for Antigone, they certainly were dire. But in her death, she kind of gains a heroic status that lets her name and her actions live on for eternity. In a sense, gaining a sense of immortality. Just a few lessons you can learn from Antigone, Breaker of Laws.